Hey Kyle, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk with you about data-driven insights in healthcare and how it all works together. But before we dive in, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what got you to doing what you're doing now at Arrive Health.
Sure. Yeah. Background's been primarily in, digital health, focused mostly on health plans. I came out of the health plan world, so grew up in the employee benefits business and um, came out, worked for some payers, sort of got a feel for what the industry was like, and found that what I was really interested in is trying to control spend and make an impact on the actual spend rather than just being at the mercy of whatever happens and trying to manage risk from a cost perspective after all those things that happened. That sent me down a corporate wellness path initially. Worked for folks focused on large self-funded employers who were trying to create a points-based incentive programs and wellness programs to make their
Yeah.
populations healthier. And worked for Principal Wellness, which was a subsidiary of the financial services company Principal that was focused on employee wellness. Learned a ton from that group. Early employee at a company called Catapult Health, early employee at Welltalk, and just got the bug to go earlier and joined a just forming team here at RX Review at the time. About 120 days ago, we rebranded from RX Review to what's now Arrive Health. Been here for 8 years, and we've been building the business pretty much since the beginning.
Awesome. Cool deal. And tell us a little bit about the new Arrive Health, kind of what it does, the problem that it's solving in healthcare. We've kind of alluded to the idea of delivering data-driven insights to the point of care, but let's kind of unpack that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, think of it as consumer choice. Really, is what we're trying to deliver to the point of care. It's that healthcare is largely absent of consumer choice, and
Uh-huh.
mostly because there's multiple stakeholders making that decision at any given moment. Right. It's some combination of provider, care team, and patient required in each case to drive a real decision in healthcare. And so what we're focused on is introducing price that is specific, timely, and accurate into each of those decision making workflows. So the largest body of our work has been introducing price into prescribing workflows. So through what's called real time benefits. So where a provider was once just choosing a medication based on what they saw to be clinically relevant, we're connecting in real time, patient specific, moment in time specific, and location specific pricing and saying, hey, you're thinking about drug A, think about drug B. You're thinking about pharmacy A, think about pharmacy B. And really, our goal there is to derive the best possible insurance price and then the best possible alternative price. Um, what we've transitioned to is also including care teams in that. We've, admitting what's always been true, which is providers really important, but care teams also pretty important in that process. And then ultimately patients and
Yeah.
trying to make sure that all of those stakeholders are empowered with the right information to drive a different decision.
Yeah. So do the patients then get a portal or something like that where they're getting this insight as well? Or is it kind of a provider facing interface, if you would, where like the doctor's going in and picking, okay, I think I'm going to prescribe this medication, like you said, and then they get an option for, medication B.
We integrate directly into the EMR systems that the providers are using. So
Okay.
Epic, Cerner, and Athena are all examples of partners of ours. And we are the feature that provides the price transparency insight in those native e-prescribing workflows. So doctors may not even know that they're using our tools. We're just the data network powering some of those tools.
Oh, okay. Cool deal. So it's not a like a plan specific or an insurance specific deal, right? Like any patient comes into this doctor, if they're using Arrive Health, that doctor is getting real-time information for that specific patient, regardless of whether they're with Blue Cross or Aetna or anything like that, right?
That's exactly right. So we're reaching out to that specific patient's insurer and the PBM associated with that insurer in most cases, and getting a real time response that includes what they'd pay today at their preferred pharmacy, any formulary exceptions that may be relevant to that choice. So if there's a prior auth or quantity limit or step therapy, and then alternatives. Those alternatives come in a couple of forms. They could be a different drug, or they could be a different pharmacy to consider. So the
Yeah.
different drug example is something in better relationship with the formulary, and the different pharmacy is the could
Different
be the mail order
location.
pharmacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you get all of that? It just sounds like that's a big rock to lift, right? Like how do you get all of those patient specific pieces of information and data sets into it in real time? Like it just sounds like that's a lot of moving pieces in the background for the doctor to be like, oh, okay, like option B is probably better for this patient.
So it's a series of direct connections with our customers. So we work on, think about it in the terms of supply and demand on the supply side of our network. We work with PBMs, with health plans, with other sources of pricing. GoodRx is an example of a company we work with where if there's not insurance in place, we want to be able to show a price. And we connect directly into those systems and have integrations that can respond with sub-second responses to generate a price. So it's really it's a connected network. What's challenging about that is many times the EMR systems and the claim systems speak different languages.
Uh,
So what we've built is the kind of think of it as a translation engine between the systems, and that's sort of an ever evolving translation engine because the disconnects between those two systems are not static. And so it's kind of, you think of it as an intelligence layer on top of those transactions that allows us to understand what the EMR means and what the claim system means and sort of translate truth between the two of them.
yeah. Okay. Um, I'm guessing something like this. Y'all have AI in any way working with this, or is this one of those things that's like just pulling data from like a big warehouse? I'm not a tech guy, so you talk about data and all this. I'm like, okay, like I can kind of understand that in concept, but clinically,
Yeah,
um,
it, it's really just about getting the right information from the
at
right
the right time.
stakeholder, putting it in front of the right person that's making the right decision. Right? It's not I don't think that we need to put hyper techy terms into it. Honestly,
Yeah,
this is like the way it should have always been. Right? Like this is the only purchasing decision on earth where someone else makes it for you, and you have no idea what it costs until you show up and see the results of it at the pharmacy counter. Right? So it's bringing that information into that decision making process in a way
yeah,
that we contend it always should have been.
yeah. I assume that there's been a big push in this because there's probably, I guess, beginning of 2022 is when they started that whole No Surprises Act and all of that, right? So I'm sure that the government mandates, policies, regulatory things are impacting what you do and how you do it. Or was it even the impetus for y'all moving into this space was the fact that there was like just politically or geopolitically, there's just this drive to get transparency, both price transparency and then obviously like outcome transparency to patients, right?
The We were working on these problems long before those things happened. We do appreciate the tailwinds for sure.
Yeah,
The more specific one to us is CMS now requires a real time benefit tool be provided by Part D plans. So that really drove some great adoption for us and some urgency in the conversations that we were largely already having. I do think as we've looked to expand beyond pharmacy, there is definitely opportunity now for us beyond pharmacy, and that I think is a result of no surprises, the price transparency rules for both providers and health plans. Those are, if nothing else, creating a conversation around how this is just something that is required to deliver great care now, right? With patients
yeah,
bearing so much of the responsibility of first dollar of healthcare spend that we've got to be able to say, can you access it? Can you afford it as a part of a good clinical decision? And that's different than it was, 2 decades ago, where deductibles were low, formularies were simple, out-of-pocket cost was not highly variable. That's just not the way of the world anymore.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So how does I'm sure, well, I'm not sure, but perhaps you're gathering data on the providers themselves who are the using the tool or have access to Arrive Health. Are y'all noticing any kind of change in, um, let's call it provider behavior or something like that, where maybe there's even a shift from one medication to another based solely on either price or accessibility or something like that in a region, as opposed to everyone going with medication A because that's the name brand that everybody knows? Are y'all able to track that data and see that data and kind of just watch it kind of evolve, especially like in geographical regions? It would be pretty interesting to see, okay, like in Georgia, for example, this medication is less expensive, so more people are gravitating towards it.
Broadly, we do have those sort of de-identified insights. I think actually one of the more interesting ones, and we're just pulling this data together, so I'll even hesitate to give you a specific
Yeah.
percentage yet. But yeah, probably close to 20% of the time, um, we're seeing that there's a $0 option that's not selected.
Oh,
So think about that. Is that we may be inhaled steroids are a good example of this. Is that they come in a half a dozen different forms, different types of inhalers or disc or whatever it may be. Uh, one of those has been contracted in a really specific way by your health plan, more than likely, and that may result in a $0 out of pocket cost for the patient. All the rest of them, maybe 250 or $300 a piece. And there's absolutely no way for the provider to know that when they make that selection for you, right? And so we're finding that 20% of the time there's opportunity there. Again, we'll release some information soon with the specific percentage, but we're finding
yeah.
that it's a very significant percentage of the time where there are $0 options out there already in place for your health plan, and we just need to make providers aware of it. It's not that providers don't want to make the right choice; it's an impossible question for them to answer, right? Like, because it's different. Your health plan is different than my health plan. It's different than the third person's health plan because they've all made
Yeah, different
decisions to manage
contracts
their
and
cost of goods in different ways, right? So it's just about connecting the right decision maker to the right information in real time is probably the most important thing that we're doing.
yeah. So pivoting that a little bit, so you said you're involved, you integrate right seamlessly into the EMR with Cerner and all this kind of stuff. How does the I guess the business model work on y'all's end? Like, I'm assuming you're not doing this for free. Like, what's the monetization and how's it working for y'all in order to, one, get access to all this data and then integrate with these EMRs?
We get paid by the supply side of our network. So as I
Okay.
mentioned, there are sources of content. So health plans, PBMs would be a source of content, and they pay us to integrate with them and then provide that information into the decision making workflows that are happening.
Okay.
Um, so that's probably the simplest way to
Yeah,
think
yeah,
about it.
yeah. Well, and then it's a win-win for them because they're getting, arguably you're helping save money for the insurance company, right? Because they're, if they, especially if there's like a $0 option out there for the patient, patient's happy, they're paying $0. Insurance is happy because they've got a contract with that medication, and then everybody wins, right?
That's right. That's the goal, right? That's the perfect scenario. Is that there's an affordable option out there for patients. We made the doctor aware of it. The patient benefited from that. We, maybe even in that process, guided it to the best pharmacy or avoided a prior auth. Like that's the ideal scenario of the happy path we should be trying to create every time it's an opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. Um, from a like an innovation into this space, I'm assuming this isn't the only, y'all aren't the only game in town. Like, are there other players in the space? And if so, like what are y'all doing that's different or innovating into this whole data driven, especially when it comes to the cost transparency piece?
From an innovation perspective, we think that the patients really got to have a seat at the table,
Yeah.
um, and that we want to make sure we're pulling in every affordability option for patients that we can aggregate, so that we're creating that happy path, no matter who the stakeholders are. So that's probably the first and most important thing. I think the second is really around navigation, and in that in a lot of cases, providers are the place that patients want to go for these answers, right? Like the trust is with your provider. They made the prescribing choice, and more often than not, something goes uh, unexpected in an unexpected way in the patient's journey. They come right back to that provider for the answers. So we really see a lot of opportunity to leverage this price transparency insight as the initiation of effectively a navigation experience that is provider centric. So, being able to help drive access through PA avoidance, PA completion, onboarding on complex medications, affordability finding, sort of wayfinding processes associated with affordability. That's the next frontier for us, is starting to automate those processes and do so in simple ways like through SMS and chat based interactions. And that's, creating that seamless experience from prescribing decision until it's in the hands of the patient, and working alongside provider care team to accomplish that, rather than completely circumventing them in the process, which I think is more often than not how it happens today.
Yeah. So then you would build out a tool, for example, Dr. Smith prescribes, medication A or whatever. Your tool would then facilitate in a way the patient, going to the right pharmacy, getting the medication. Like, is that what you're talking about with the SMS and kind of driving that, or are you talking about messaging and communicating with the providers themselves?
Both patient
Both.
and provider. Our goal is to create, real marketplace dynamics, to create real consumer choice in this process. That's going to require that we engage with all, all three: provider, care team, and
Yeah.
patient in a seamless and consistent way.
Yeah. That's awesome. Um, I guess I've got a couple more questions and then we'll kind of wrap up here. So you've kind of already mentioned your vision for where you think healthcare is going. Obviously, it's changed. We're moving to more transparency. What do you think is like the next big innovation? You've kind of alluded to it with this SMS. Do you see anything kind of bigger or broader happening specifically in this space of data-driven healthcare?
I think TEFCO will be an important turning point for everyone as the frameworks for data exchange become more consistent and data becomes more liquid as a result of it. Then things like prior auth and specialty enrollment and just the onboarding process and access processes, not just in drug but across the board, uh, well, then the possibility of automating those things in real ways becomes tangible when those things are more adopted. So I think that's one aspect of it. I do think price transparency is sort of a seismic shift, but I think the seismic shift is not price transparency. Price transparency is responding to a seismic shift that already occurred, which is how healthcare is paid for. Right?
Yeah,
It's now coming out of the patient's pocket, and you can almost, there's a little bit of a, this metaphor might be a reach, so push back. But I mean, think about it. Think about college tuition. Right? Used to be federal government paid for a ton of college tuition, and really you were competing for parents' decisions. And now it's the student that's taking out the loan in many cases and carrying that bill, and you're competing for students. And so colleges are having to respond in a different way because the decision maker changed.
yeah,
Um, Healthcare's gone through the same change where it used to be, you know, relatively rich benefits, low out of pocket for the patient. Now it's, $5,000 deductibles, and patients are going to have to become much more informed consumers. So, the data liquidity piece, with now a huge responsibility on the shoulders of patients from a purchasing perspective, sort of as we move to defined contribution rather than defined benefit, that's got a chance to change everything, right? You're going to have to be a much more connected and informed consumer of healthcare, and there's a lot of opportunity to step in as the right steward for that.
yeah. No, I totally agree. We've been talking about that on the podcast for a while. That, like you said, people have 5,000. We had a person in the clinic the other day that had a $7,500 deductible. It's like, well, at that point, you're basically paying all of this course of care out of pocket. So you're going to be much more, most patients are much more concerned about how they're spending the dollars. And then healthcare is one of those weird places where the balance of power from an information perspective is totally skewed. Most patients have, unless they've gone to some kind of medical school or something like that, they just don't know. It's not that they're not smart. They have no idea between, treatment A versus treatment B, or drug A versus drug B. So it's
And
crazy.
and in that scenario, right, step one is going to be make sure you're priced competitively, but ultimately at some point prices will be in line with one another, and then it's going to be around competing for patient experience, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what marketplaces do, is that, we all buy everything on Amazon because it's the simplest way to buy something online, and some version of that's going to show up in healthcare, right? As if your scenario is exactly the right one. It's a few $1,000 procedure. You're competing for the consumer's dollars. Hold price consistent, then you're competing around experience and outcomes, and that's, I think, got the chance to change everything.
Yeah. All right. Well, last question from the team here is, who is Lucy and what does it mean to Lucy up? I'm kind of interested in this.
That is a terrific softball. So a little bit of our origin story. So we were founded by a guy named Kevin O'Brien in Denver, Colorado. So Kevin's a physician, still practicing physician in the Denver area. So all of this started because Kevin's mom came to him and said, "Hey, I've got a unbearable out-of-pocket expense for my meds." And Kevin had the skill set to look at her meds and say, if you take this brand, you break it into its generic parts, that drops your price. If you pill split this one, that drops your price. If you think about this therapeutic equivalent, that drops your price. And so he, solved that problem for his mom. Her name's Lucy. And ultimately that led him to start doing that in his own clinic. So he started to build this spreadsheet of ways to save on medication for his patients. And that was the initial spark that led to this company.
Wow.
Is that we, sort of all came together on that problem, and said, this isn't a spreadsheet, this isn't a book. He was actually going to publish this as a book. This is a piece of technology. This is the way this should work, right? And so that's the origin. That's sort of the heritage from which we've come. We have a mantra around the company called "It's Lucy Up," which is, to remind us that this is why we're here. Why we're here is to solve the problem for people.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a Lucy. Everybody knows somebody that's had an experience in this system that didn't make any sense, or was hard to navigate, or was too expensive, or was frustrating in some way, or worse, right? And so I think we need to consistently keep that Lucy story in front of us, and we're constantly thinking about the Lucys in our life as we show up every day, shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Humanizing healthcare. So where can people find out about you, connect with you, learn more about Arrive Health, all of the places where they can find you?
We have all the normal social stuff. So, I think we're most active on LinkedIn. We've got a new, beautiful arrivehealth.com. As I mentioned, we rebranded
Wonderful.
only a few months ago. So catch us at arrivehealth.com and all the normal social outlets.
Awesome.
Cool.
Cool
We'll
deal.
actually, I guess we'll also be at Health in a few weeks too, at the Health conference. So,
awesome.
If there's any interest in the in-person experience, we've got a team headed to Health.
Cool deal. Well, Kyle, thanks so much. Have a good one.
Yeah, appreciate it, Rafi. Thanks for the time.